It is May 2023 on the Oregon coast, and something has washed in from the deep that nobody can explain. A creature nearly 5 feet long is lying in the wet sand, pale and iridescent in the morning light. It has no scales. Its jaw drops open to reveal 2 primary fangs the length of your finger, backed by rows of smaller serrated teeth. Above its spine, a tall sail fin runs nearly the entire length of its body, like something you would expect to find fossilized in ancient rock, not washed onto a public beach surrounded by morning joggers and dog walkers. Beachgoers from Nehalem to Bandon, a stretch of coastline over 180 miles long, are finding them. Dead or barely alive. Nobody sent them. No storm explained them. Scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration admitted they had no record of anything like this happening before. This is the Lancetfish. And everything science knows about it came not from watching it live, but from cutting open the stomachs of the fish that ate it. Because this animal almost never comes to the surface willingly. Until May 2023, when something went terribly wrong. Imagine looking at a fish that appears to have been designed by someone who had only ever seen descriptions of prehistoric creatures and nothing else. The Lancetfish carries a scientific name, Alepisaurus ferox, that translates roughly from Greek as fierce, scaleless lizard. That name is not an exaggeration on any count. The body is long and laterally compressed, meaning it is tall and thin when viewed from the front, like a blade held sideways in the water. Fully grown adults reach up to 7 feet in length and can weigh close to 20 pounds. The skin has no scales at all, just smooth, pale, iridescent silver tissue that shimmers faintly in any light, darker along the spine and fins. Running your hand along its surface would feel nothing like touching a fish, more like touching a wet membrane stretched over something ancient. The jaw is the first thing people notice when they encounter one up close. It gapes open to nearly the back of the eye socket, creating an enormous strike zone. Inside the front of that jaw sit 2 primary fangs, thick and slightly curved, designed not to cut, but to grip. Behind those primary fangs, rows of smaller teeth line both jaws, ensuring that whatever enters the mouth stays there. The eyes are large and circular, built for low light conditions where the only illumination might be the faint chemical glow of bioluminescent creatures drifting past in the dark. And then there is the dorsal fin. This is the feature that makes the Lancetfish look like it does not belong in any ocean on the modern planet. The fin runs along almost the entire length of the back, tall and rigid, with between 30 and 45 rays supporting it like the ribs of an open fan. When fully extended, it towers above the rest of the body in a way that calls to mind something very specific. Dimetrodon, the sail-backed predator from the early Permian period that lived nearly 290 million years ago, tens of millions of years before the first dinosaur ever walked the Earth. Dimetrodon carried a similar structure, and scientists debated for over a century whether that ancient sail helped the animal regulate body temperature, attracted mates, or served some other purpose entirely. For the Lancetfish, the sail almost certainly works differently. Scientists believe it functions as a stabilizing and steering mechanism during rapid strike attacks, keeping the body on a precise course as it lunges forward on its deeply forked tail at sudden speed toward a target. Because despite looking like it belongs behind glass in a natural history museum, this fish is very much a living, active predator. It has been recorded at depths exceeding 6,000 feet below the ocean surface, and it ranges across every non-polar ocean on the planet. From the waters near Japan and Australia to the Gulf of Mexico to the coast of Iceland. Scientists have found it as far north as Greenland and as far south as the southern Pacific. No ocean basin seems too warm or too cold for it to pass through. There is one more biological detail about this animal that deserves attention before we follow it into its hunting ground. The lancetfish is hermaphroditic, meaning each individual carries both male and female reproductive organs simultaneously. Whether or not they are capable of fertilizing themselves is unknown. More striking than that, spawning has never once been directly observed. Scientists believe they release eggs freely into the water column based on the tiny size of their larvae, but nobody has ever witnessed the event. This creature has been formally known to science since 1833, and we still have not seen it reproduce. What we do know, because the evidence lands in research labs without anyone needing to go looking for it, is how it hunts, and the method is far stranger than the body suggests. Picture yourself at 400 meters below the ocean surface. The sunlight that reaches this depth is so faint, it barely registers on the eye. The water temperature sits close to freezing. The pressure is roughly 40 times what your body experiences standing on a beach. There are no plants here, no photosynthesis, no green energy of any kind. What drifts down from the world above is mostly dead material, fragments of organisms, waste particles, and the slowly sinking remains of things that died in shallower water. This is the mesopelagic zone, more commonly called the twilight zone. It stretches from roughly 200 meters down to about 1,000 meters, and it is the primary hunting ground of the lancetfish. What most people do not realize about this zone is its sheer scale. It is the largest living habitat on the planet, measured by volume, covering more space than all the world's forests, grasslands, and shallow reefs combined. And we have explored less than 1% of it. Here is where the lancetfish's body reveals its real logic, because despite that imposing physical appearance, there is a significant contradiction built into this animal. Its muscles are watery and gelatinous. They are simply not built for sustained swimming or long chases across open water. A lancetfish cannot pursue prey the way a tuna or a marlin does. It does not have that kind of endurance. Trying to sprint across any meaningful distance would exhaust it rapidly. So instead, it does not sprint at all. It floats. Nearly motionless, silvery body blending into the diffuse light, filtering from above. The lancetfish hangs in the water column and waits. Its large eyes scan the surrounding darkness with patient, continuous attention. The entire strategy depends on stillness, on letting the prey come to it, rather than the other way around. When something passes within range, the dorsal sail engages as a stabilizer. The deeply forked tail fires in a sudden burst of concentrated speed, and the jaw opens to its full, enormous width. The large primary fangs close first, locking the prey in place before any escape response can fully register. The strike is designed to be over before the target processes what happened. What goes into that jaw is extraordinary in its variety. Scientists who have studied lancetfish stomach contents have identified prey from 97 separate families of marine life. 97. Swimming crabs, squid, octopus, bristleworms, small fish of dozens of different species, tunicates, gelatinous plankton, amphipods, and large cephalopods from depths well below 500 meters. Some individual stomachs have contained prey from multiple ocean depth zones simultaneously, meaning the lancetfish had been hunting at genuinely different depths during the same feeding period. There is something else unusual about how it processes what it catches. When researchers open lancetfish stomachs, they frequently find prey that is barely digested. Not partially digested. Barely. The food inside is often so well preserved that scientists can identify exact species without needing any additional laboratory analysis. The lancetfish appears to store everything it catches in its stomach and begin the actual digestion process much later, further down in the intestine. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration researchers have described this as bulk feeding, eating as much as possible whenever food is available, then digesting it gradually when the body needs energy. For an ambush predator in an environment where the next meal might not arrive for hours or even days, this makes a certain cold logic: unfill the stomach when the opportunity exists. Worry about processing later. It is an approach to nutrition that treats the stomach less like a digestive organ and more like a storage system. But there is one prey category in those stomachs that changes the entire picture of this animal. It is not squid, it is not crab, and it is not a fish from some other species. What those stomach contents reveal is the behavior that earned the lancetfish its other common name, the one that appears in scientific literature just as often as any official title. They call it the cannibal fish. Scientists who study lancetfish regularly open their stomachs and find something that takes a moment to process. Inside the stomach of a lancetfish, among the squid beaks and crustacean shells and barely digested fish, they find another lancetfish. A smaller one, recently swallowed, still largely intact thanks to that famously slow digestion. The predator had eaten one of its own kind, and that is not even the strangest part. Researchers at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration have reported finding a lancetfish inside another lancetfish inside the stomach of a tuna. 3 animals nested inside each other. The predator became prey again before any of them had time to fully digest. That image, 3 layers of the same species stacked inside one another, is not an anomaly pulled from a single unusual specimen. It represents the logical endpoint of a feeding pattern that repeats across every ocean basin where this fish lives. The frequency data makes this impossible to dismiss as occasional behavior. Studies conducted across multiple ocean regions have found that cannibalism in the lancetfish occurs with a frequency ranging from 0% up to 45.5%, depending on location and conditions. In some sampling areas, nearly half of all examined lancetfish had consumed another lancetfish. In others, the rate was considerably lower. The difference comes down to one variable: the availability of other food. When the twilight zone is relatively productive and crustaceans, squid, and small fish are available in reasonable numbers, the lancetfish eats them and does not typically target its own species. But when prey availability drops and the open water becomes a genuinely scarce and difficult hunting ground, larger lancetfish begin targeting smaller ones, not out of aggression or territorial competition, simply because they are there, because they qualify as prey by the only standard that matters in that environment, which is that they can be caught and they provide energy. Size is the primary deciding factor in every documented case. A large lancetfish approaching a smaller one represents a lethal threat. A smaller lancetfish approaching a larger one represents no threat at all. The species essentially divides itself into 2 survival categories based on body length: the animals that eat and the animals that are eaten. And depending on the scarcity of other options, the same individual can move from one category to the other, simply by encountering the wrong animal at the wrong moment. This behavior is not random or chaotic. It follows the same cold, opportunistic logic that governs every other feeding decision this animal makes. Food is scarce in the twilight zone. Finding and catching prey requires energy. Another lancetfish represents a large, energy-rich meal that does not need to be chased across any meaningful distance. From the perspective of basic survival arithmetic in an extremely food-limited environment, it is a rational outcome of rational pressures. The deep sea does not reward sentiment. The hermaphrodite biology adds a layer of complexity that science has not yet resolved. Every lancetfish carries both male and female reproductive organs simultaneously. This means that when two lancetfish of similar size encounter each other in the water column, one possible outcome is reproduction. When their sizes differ significantly, a different outcome becomes more likely. The same encounter that might produce the next generation of lancetfish could also produce a meal. Whether the animal has any biological mechanism to distinguish between these two outcomes is completely unknown. No one has ever watched two lancetfish interact in the wild under any circumstances. Spawning has never been witnessed. Mating behavior has never been observed. The full reproductive biology of a fish, cataloged since 1833, remains almost entirely a mystery, because no researcher has ever observed a living lancetfish doing anything in its natural habitat. Every behavioral conclusion science has reached about this animal comes from specimens caught accidentally in longline nets set for tuna and swordfish. The lancetfish is not commercially valuable. Its flesh is too gelatinous for human consumption, and its depth range makes direct observation practically impossible. So it keeps its secrets. Or rather, it kept them until scientists realized that the animal's own stomach, that slow and barely digesting storage system, was quietly revealing something far larger than any individual feeding event. Because the lancetfish barely digests its food, its stomach is essentially a mobile archive of the twilight zone. When researchers open one, they are not examining biological waste. They are looking at a near-perfect snapshot of what lives at 400 to 1,000 meters below the surface at the time and location where this animal was feeding. The prey inside is preserved well enough that species identification requires nothing more than careful examination in most cases. The twilight zone is so difficult to access with cameras and trawling equipment that many of the organisms living there have never been directly observed or collected. Standard research trawls are expensive, time-consuming, and often miss creatures that are small, fast, or simply occupying the wrong section of water column at the wrong moment. But the lancetfish collects them constantly as part of its daily feeding. Across depths and locations no research vessel visits regularly. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration researchers working with the Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center, alongside collaborators at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, realized that studying lancetfish stomach contents gave them a window into the mid-ocean food web that was simply not available through any other practical method. The results were remarkable. Analysis of lancetfish diet revealed prey from 97 different families, many of them poorly studied or previously unrecorded from the regions where the fish were caught. Some species of deep-sea fish and cephalopods have been formally described and named by science based entirely on specimens recovered from lancetfish stomachs. The lancetfish did not know it was conducting biodiversity surveys on behalf of the scientific community. But the record shows that it was. And then the same researchers found something inside those stomachs that had not come from the twilight zone at all. something that had come from us. In a North Atlantic study, microplastics were found in 74% of examined lancetfish stomachs. Not trace amounts, an average of nearly 5 plastic items per animal, ranging in size from microscopic fragments to pieces several centimeters long. Polypropylene, polyethylene, polystyrene. The same materials found in everyday packaging and disposable products used on land across the world. The lancetfish most likely ingests plastic through its prey. Smaller animals feeding near the ocean surface consume microplastics directly, then sink deeper or are consumed by midwater creatures that sink deeper still, and eventually they become part of the twilight zone food web that the lancetfish feeds on. As a large opportunistic predator consuming prey from multiple depth zones, the lancetfish accumulates everything those smaller animals swallowed, including everything plastic. The pollution does not stop at the surface. It moves through every depth, through every predator, carried down by the very food web it is contaminating. With that in mind, return to that Oregon beach in May 2023. The lancetfish in the wet sand, still alive, being carefully carried back into the surf, and scientists offered 3 possible explanations for the mass stranding event along that 180-mile stretch of coastline. The first is illness or injury disabling normal swimming, leaving the animals vulnerable to being pushed shoreward by coastal currents they could not fight. The second is temperature shock, a sudden exposure to cold water outside their preferred range that disorients them and impairs their movement control. The third is that storm activity pushed them from depth into shallow coastal waters they lacked the muscular endurance to escape. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration biologist who investigated the event was direct in his conclusion. There was no single confirmed explanation. No one theory covered every documented case along the full stretch of coastline. But none of the proposed explanations are extraordinary. All 3 are plausible and predictable outcomes for a gelatinous muscled animal with limited swimming endurance that occasionally ventures closer to the surface than usual. The lancetfish was never built for shallow water. Its watery muscles, the same muscles that make it such an effective patient ambush predator at depth, give it almost no ability to fight a strong current once it has been caught in one. The beach was not a destination. It was a consequence. That one individual, helped back to sea on a May morning by a person who had never heard of a lancetfish before that day, swam off, back toward the depth it came from, back toward the twilight zone where no camera has ever followed it, back toward a life that science has been studying for nearly 2 centuries without ever once observing it directly in the wild. The lancetfish has been living in the twilight zone for millions of years. It hunts the same way it always has, using patience and a set of teeth that have not needed to change because the darkness it operates in has not changed. It eats whatever is available. When that means eating one of its own species, it eats one of its own species. This is not cruelty. This is arithmetic in a world where energy is the only currency that matters, and where the next meal is never guaranteed. We know it almost entirely through what it swallowed. We have never filmed it alive in its environment, never watched it hunt or mate or rest. A creature 7 feet long, found in every major ocean on the planet, has kept the details of its daily life completely out of reach. Every stomach scientists open is one of the only real windows we have into a habitat covering more than 600 million cubic kilometers of ocean. The lancetfish has spent millions of years being the most thorough naturalist in that zone, cataloging everything that lives there inside its own body, while we stand at the surface trying to figure it out from the outside. The next video in this series goes deeper into that same habitat, following the creatures that perform the largest synchronized migration on the planet every single night. Billions of animals rising from these depths toward the surface to feed, then sinking back before dawn. The scale of what actually moves through that water column each night will fundamentally change how you think about what the ocean actually is. Before you go, here is a question worth sitting with. The Lancetfish survives in near total darkness, under crushing pressure, in one of the most food-scarce environments on Earth, by being willing to eat absolutely anything that comes within range, including members of its own species. It has done this successfully for millions of years and remains a critical link in the ocean food web. If you were designing a survival strategy for the deep sea from scratch, would you build it differently? Leave your answer in the comments. There are no wrong answers here, and the last time this question ran, the responses were genuinely fascinating. Subscribe if the deep ocean is where you want to spend your time. The next one goes deeper.